administration come from factories, hospitals, grocery stores, restaurants, your local post office. One worker at an area pizza place warned COVID-positive employees are still making and selling pizzas. The employer is aware and encouraging this. The complaints detail a lack of PPE, failure to disinfect facilities, and sick co-workers. Most were filed in the spring, but they continue to pour in. Peg Seminario is a national workplace safety expert.
What's going on in workplaces is important not just for the workers, but for their family members and their communities as well.
Of more than 1,000 closed complaints, OSHA made just 6 on-site visits. Linda Lutton, WBEZ News.
When Chicago Public Schools released its plan for in-person learning last week, many teachers and parents railed against it. But some support it and want others to have an open mind. WBEZ Susie An reports.
Parent Elaine Bobby says remote learning has been especially difficult for her oldest son, who is autistic.
When they first started online learning, it was just like, well, we were an afterthought, those that have special needs kids. So it felt like at least they're trying to acknowledge us and start with that.
She was happy to see that CPS was planning to bring special needs and preschool students back to school in January. According to a CPS survey of parents of those students, 34% said they wanted to return for in-person learning. Bobby says the timing of the announcement wasn't great with the number of current COVID-19 cases, but she says it's important to start planning even if the district might have to shift its time frame again. Susie An, WBEZ News.
Checking our forecast, becoming overcast with snow mixed with rain overnight, a low around 35. Tomorrow, snow, sleet changing to all rain with some slushy accumulation. We have a winter weather advisory for Kane and McHenry counties tomorrow morning. Right now, it's 40 degrees. I'm Melva Lara, WBEZ News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Little Passports, offering activity kits to keep kids engaged and expand their minds. They'll explore France and Brazil and build a volcano and submarine from their kitchen table. LittlePassports.com.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Mary Louise Cameron.
And I'm Audie Cornish. President Trump tonight is allowing the formal transition to the Biden presidency to begin. Trump is not actually conceding that he lost the election, but the president tweeted that he's instructing his administration to, quote, do what needs to be done with regard to initial protocols. What that appears to mean in practice is that 20 days since the election ended and more than 2 weeks since Joe Biden's victory became clear, the General Services Administration is recognizing that President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris won the election. That means their team will get resources and access to begin the process of taking over federal agencies. NPR's Aisha Roscoe covers the White House and joins us now. Aisha, this came as news in a tweet, right? What else did the president have to say?
Well, you know, as you mentioned, he did not concede. He said that the fight continues, they're going to keep up, and that they believe, or he says he believes he will prevail. Of course, he has been saying that, but now you have this formal process beginning. And he says that he makes this point that he directed GSA to begin, cooperating with these initial protocols, or basically cooperating with the transition, which is interesting because you have the head of GSA, Emily Murphy, who's come under a lot of pressure for holding off on making this determination that Biden was the apparent winner. And she, in a letter to Biden, she defended herself, saying that contrary to media reports and insinuations, my decision was not made out of fear or favoritism. And she makes this argument that she came to this decision independently. But of course, you also have Trump basically saying that he is directing it. As has been the case throughout the Trump administration, once again, you have conflicting narratives coming out of the Trump administration. But either way, the bottom line is the same. The transition can officially begin.
Give us a little more context for this. Over the last couple of days, what kind of pressure has been building on the White House?
This comes as the White House is really, the walls are kind of closing in on President Trump when it comes to this holding out and trying to fight the outcome of the election. He's filed a number of court cases. Pretty much all of them have been thrown out, or the vast majority of them have been argued against, with the judge, federal judge in Pennsylvania, basically saying that this is not, they don't have a case. You had Michigan certifying its election results today. Pennsylvania is moving ahead. And then you had Republican senators slowly but surely coming out and saying, even as they say they support President Trump, saying that it is time to try to move on. You had Tennessee Senator Lamar Alexander reminding the president in a statement that you will be remembered for what you do last. And you had Ohio Senator Rob Portman, who will be up for election in 2022, saying that, he supports the president, but right now it looks likely that Joe Biden will become the next president, so it's time to begin the transition process so that the transition is seamless.
And what will that look like? What does this change?
It means money, support, and that they can go in and talk to these federal agencies. The transition team can go in and talk to federal officials to really begin the process of preparing for governance.
That's NPR's Aisha Roscoe. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
The United States has had 77 Treasury Secretaries in the last 231 years. So far, they have all been men. That is about to change. President-elect Joe Biden plans to nominate Janet Yellen to head the Treasury Department. If confirmed, she'll have her hands full shaping policy as the U.S. continues to dig its way out of the deep economic hole caused by the coronavirus pandemic. NPR's Scott Horsley is on the story. He's with us now. Hey, Scott.
Good to be with you, Mary Louise.
So Janet Yellen is a woman. What other qualities does she bring to the table?
Well, she's already broken one glass ceiling. She was the first woman to head the Federal Reserve. She did that for 4 years, and she was a vice chair before that. So she helped steer the central bank through the end of the last financial crisis and the beginning of what would become a record-long period of economic growth. She was also a top White House economist in the Clinton administration. So if she's confirmed as Treasury Secretary, that would sort of round out the economic trifecta for Janet Yellen. She is a familiar face. The stock market took the news of her nomination in stride this afternoon. She's known as someone who's well prepared, someone who can build consensus. She won some GOP support back in 2014 when then President Obama named her as Fed chair. And she's also popular with the progressive wing of the Democratic Party.
Just to flesh out this role a little bit more, the Treasury Secretary generally is seen as the administration's point person on economic policy. And fair to say Biden and his team will be inheriting a very complicated economic situation.
Yeah, it's an economy that is on the mend, but still faces really big challenges. The pandemic triggered, of course, a really sharp contraction in the economy last spring. It's bounced partway back, but that recovery appears to be losing steam, and federal relief efforts are also running out of gas, just as the pandemic itself is getting a second wind. We've, of course, seen alarming spikes in new infections. Hospitals around the country are filling up. That's prompting new restrictions on business activity, and of course, it's making consumers more wary about going out and spending money, which is not what retailers want to hear as they get ready for the all-important holiday shopping season.
You just said, Scott, federal relief efforts are running out of gas. Do we know what the new administration's plan is to do something about that?
Well, they're hoping something gets done before they take office. The president-elect and his team have been urging Congress to pass some new coronavirus relief now. The Fed Governor Lael Brainerd, who served alongside Yellen at the central bank and was also in the running for the Treasury job, has been stressing that federal relief efforts really help to jumpstart the recovery in the spring and early summer, and she's urging lawmakers not to pull the plug on that help prematurely.
We will have a much better, stronger, more inclusive recovery if we do, in fact, continue to see that targeted fiscal support that was so important to the bounce back from their recovery.
You know, we've got millions of people who have exhausted their regular unemployment benefits and are now relying on emergency aid. We've got millions more who are counting on a federal program for people who ordinarily don't qualify for jobless benefits. Both those programs are set to expire in just over a month.
Speaking of pulling the plug, though, if I could focus you for a sec on the current Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin, he is pulling the plug on some other kinds of help. Explain what that would mean.
Yeah, these are Fed emergency lending programs, which haven't made a whole lot of loans, but their supporters say the simple fact that they existed helped to keep credit flowing smoothly. Congressional Democrats are blasting the outgoing Treasury Secretary for, taking some economic pills out of the medicine chest in what are the waning days of the Trump administration.
All right, thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
That's NPR's chief economics correspondent Scott Horsley on the news that President-elect Biden intends to nominate former Fed Chair Janet Yellen as his Treasury Secretary.
Biden could also make history by naming a woman to be defense secretary. He's already tapped a longtime aide, Tony Blinken, to become Secretary of State, and a veteran diplomat, Linda Thomas Greenfield, to represent him at the UN. NPR's Michelle Kelman reports on an effort to get more women in national security posts.
In the 2012 presidential campaign, Republican Mitt Romney was mocked for a comment he made about seeking gender parity in his governor's office.
I went to a number of women's groups and said, can you help us find folks? And they brought us whole binders full of women.
Looking back, Lindsey Rodman thinks he was onto something. Rodman is a Marine Corps Reserve officer who's now executive director of the Leadership Council for Women in National Security. The group may not have binders, but it does have a database.
The point of our effort, where we put forward over 850 very well qualified women for the most senior 200 Senate confirmed political appointments in the national security space, was about making the case that these women are ready now. They are available. Here's their information.
During the campaign, Biden signed a pledge to seek gender parity in his national security team. So far, Rodman is encouraged. Today, the president-elect announced that Avril Haines, if confirmed, will be the first female director of national intelligence. And veteran diplomat Linda Thomas Greenfield was tapped to become U.S. ambassador to the UN, which will be a cabinet post. Biden also has several women on his short list for defense secretary. That would be a first, though Tamara Kaufman-Wittes says this isn't about symbolism.
We're not looking for